Hello everyone, Ludwig here. What happens when the quietest member of the Trump family decides to finally speak up? When Barron Trump took over the mic at Donald Trump's inauguration, nobody could see what was coming. But before we dive in, let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because this video is about all of us, about what makes America great. The day was bright at Trump's inauguration, cameras flashing, supporters cheering, but amid the celebration, tension was brewing. While Donald Trump stood proud at the podium, his son Barron watched from behind. Reserved as always, yet something was different in his eyes. The usually shy teenager seemed alert, ready. That's when it happened. A commotion erupted in the crowd. A young liberal activist, his face twisted with mockery, started berating an elderly veteran. "Your America is dead," he sneered, pointing a finger at the old man's MAGA hat. "Your values are outdated, and nobody needs them anymore." The veteran's hands trembled as he gripped his cane, his voice barely audible as he tried to speak of sacrifice and duty. But the activist's friends just laughed louder. And that's when Barron Trump did something that would change everything. No one expected what happened next. Without a word, Barron Trump stepped forward, his tall frame casting a shadow over the presidential podium. His father mid-speech paused. The crowd hushed. Even the mockery died in the activist's throat as the youngest Trump reached for the microphone. "I wasn't planning to speak today." Barron's voice rang clear across the mall. "But what I just witnessed isn't the America my father talks about. And it's certainly not the America that man over there." He gestured to the veteran. "Nearly died protecting." The silence was deafening. Here was the quiet kid from the campaign trail, the one who barely spoke in public, commanding the attention of thousands. His next words cut through the tension like a knife. "You know what I see when I look at that veteran's MAGA hat?" Barron's voice grew stronger. "I see a man who stormed beaches under Nazi fire while people your age died beside him. I see someone who worked factory jobs for 40 years, building the America you now take for granted." He turned directly to the young activist, whose smirk had long since faded. "And you call him outdated? You mock his values?" Barron's words carried a weight beyond his years. "Let me tell you something about values." The crowd leaned in, cell phones forgotten in their hands, as Barron Trump began to lay out a vision of America that would leave both supporters and critics stunned. "You want to know what's really outdated?" Barron's voice filled the silence. "Thinking you can build a future by disrespecting the people who gave you everything you have. That's not progressive. That's just ingratitude." The veteran straightened his back, pride returning to his weathered face. Around him, other elderly supporters nodded, some wiping tears. "My father taught me something important," Barron continued, his composure remarkable for his age. "He said America isn't just a place or a government. It's a promise passed down through generations. A promise that if you work hard, respect others, and love your country, you can build something that lasts." He paused, scanning the crowd. The young activist shifted uncomfortably. "But here's what really bothers me." Barron's voice took on an edge. "People my age think they're so enlightened. They mock tradition. They laugh at faith. They call patriotism outdated. Yet they're the first to enjoy the freedoms others died for." The crowd was transfixed. This wasn't just another Trump speaking. This was something different, something raw and authentic that transcended politics. "You know what I see in this crowd today?" Barron gestured broadly. "I see two Americas fighting each other, one that remembers sacrifice, hard work, and respect, and another that thinks wisdom comes from TikTok videos." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Even some of the critics looked thoughtful, but no one expected what Barron would say next. His words would not only silence his critics, but would make headlines across the nation. Barron's gaze locked onto the young activist, but his words were meant for everyone. "Let me make something crystal clear," he said, his voice steady and determined. "When you mock these people, these veterans, these workers, these believers, you're not just disrespecting them. You're betraying everything that makes America possible." The crowd was completely silent now. Even Donald Trump stood motionless, watching his youngest son with visible pride. "You think their values are outdated?" Barron continued, his intensity building. Family, hard work, patriotism, faith, respect. Tell me, what exactly are you offering instead? Division, mockery, cancel culture? He stepped closer to the podium's edge, his presence commanding despite his youth. I've been quiet for years, watching, learning. And you know what I've learned. The people who shout the loudest about progress often understand the least about what makes a nation great. The veteran who had been mocked was now standing tall, his eyes shining. Around him, others straightened in their seats, faces glowing with renewed pride. But here's what really matters. Barron's voice softened slightly, though its power remained. It's not about old versus young, or left versus right. It's about remembering who we are, all of us. And I'm standing here today because someone needs to say, what comes next? He paused, and in that moment you could hear a pin drop across the National Mall. What he would say next would send shockwaves through the political landscape and make every major network in America scramble to update their headlines. Barron Trump took a deep breath, his young face showing a resolve that seemed beyond his years. I want to make a promise, he began, not just to these supporters, but to every American who still believes in what made this country great. I promise you this, Barron declared, his voice growing stronger. When I become president, and yes, I said when, not if, I'll protect more than just our borders and our economy. I'll protect the soul of America. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Donald Trump's eyebrows shot up, a rare moment of genuine surprise crossing his face. I'll protect the factory worker who still believes in the American dream. Barron continued, his words gaining momentum. I'll protect the teacher who still wants to pray with her students, the farmer who works his land with pride, the small business owner who built everything from nothing. He turned to face the young activist directly. And yes, I'll even protect your right to mock what you don't understand, because that's what America does. We protect everyone's rights, even when they use those rights to disrespect everything we hold dear. The crowd erupted in applause, but Barron raised his hand for silence. But understand this, his voice took on a new intensity. The America you take for granted, it wasn't built by mockers and critics. It was built by the very people you're laughing at today. The young activists' friends had stopped filming with their phones. Some looked down at their feet. Others exchanged uncomfortable glances. Look around you, Barron gestured to the crowd. Every comfortable life you enjoy, every freedom you take for granted, every opportunity you have, it was paid for by their sacrifice, by their work, by their dedication to values you call outdated. His voice dropped to almost a whisper, but somehow it carried even further. And I stand here today, at 17 years old, to tell you something that might shock you. These values aren't dying. They're not fading away. They're about to make the biggest comeback in American history. The silence was electric. Every eye was fixed on this teenager who suddenly seemed to embody something much bigger than himself. But what he said next would make every news channel in America stop their regular programming. This isn't just about politics, Barron's voice rang with conviction. This is about remembering who we are. And I'm telling you right now, he paused, his gaze sweeping across the mall. The next generation of American leadership isn't going to come from those who hate our history. It's going to come from those who learn from it. The veteran who had been mocked earlier was now openly weeping. Others around him reached out, touching his shoulders in solidarity. So here's my promise, my real promise, Barron continued, his voice carrying a weight that silenced even the whispers. When I take this oath, 16 years from now, I won't just preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution. I'll preserve, protect, and defend the values that made that Constitution possible. The crowd erupted, but Barron wasn't finished. His next words would become the most viral moment of the decade. And to every young person who thinks America's values are outdated, watch closely, because you're about to witness the greatest restoration in American history, a restoration of respect, of dignity, of unity, not because I say so, but because the very people you mock today, they're going to lead it. He turned to the young activist one last time. You said their America is gone? Well, I have news for you. Their America isn't gone. Their America is just getting started. Donald Trump stood motionless, a look of astonishment and pride battling on his face. Melania wiped a tear. But it was the reaction rippling through the crowd that told the real story. Something had shifted. Something fundamental had changed. The aftermath was immediate and electric. The young activist who had started it all pushed through the crowd to reach the veteran. Tears streaming down his face, he extended his hand. The old man took it, pulled him close, and embraced him as the crowd erupted in cheers. But that was just the beginning. Within hours, video clips of Barron's speech spread across every social platform. The quiet Trump son had become a symbol of something America desperately needed: a bridge between generations, a voice of reason in a divided nation. News networks scrambled to analyze every word. Political experts debated the implications. But the real story wasn't in their analysis. It was in the millions of Americans who watched and rewatched that moment, sharing it with messages like, "This is what we've been waiting for," and "America's future has hope." The veteran later told reporters, "In all my years, I've never felt more seen, more understood. That young man, he gets it. He really gets it." And Barron Trump? He simply returned to his quiet position on stage. But something had changed. The shy teenager who had stepped up to the microphone was gone. In his place stood a young man who had just changed the course of American history. Today, that speech is remembered as more than just a moment. It became a movement, a reminder that America's greatest strength isn't in choosing sides, but in remembering what unites us. This is Ludwig, and if this story moved you, make sure to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because sometimes the most powerful voices come from the most unexpected places. And who knows, maybe one day, we may really this speech coming from President Barron. Thank you for watching, and God bless America.